So far what we have is a scene where our character falls straight down and comes in contact with the ground actors that we created perfectly. Now we want to set it up so that our actor can move left and right and of course jump over these gaps. To do that, we're going to double click on our hero actor so we can get into his brains. And I'm just going to do a little bit of cleanup right now. It's really good to name all these things, organize them into groups. So I'm just going to rename accelerate to gravity. I like to keep the word accelerate so I know what behavior I chose, even though it's pretty obvious from the controls, but it just makes it easy to understand what you're working with here. Did I work with accelerate or move behavior? So gravity, which is accelerate, and then collide with ground, just so I know what these things are. And with both of these things selected, by holding the Shift key, I'm going to click on Create Group, and that's going to group them together. And of course, I can fold this group down and rename this gravity and collide with ground. Okay, so now that that's nice and organized, I can continue building without this space getting too cluttered. So I'm going to click in an empty area, so I deselect this group, and I'm going to click on the Create Rule button here. So we'll click Create a Rule. Now I'm going to create a few things here that aren't going to make sense to you right away. We have to just create these things first, and I want you to follow along, and then I'll explain what they're going to do. So I'm going to switch this over to key, and I'm going to choose the right key as my input, but I'm going to switch this to up. That's very important. Okay? So just follow along, and then in a few moments I'll make sure I explain all of this to you. I'm then going to click the plus icon here to add another one of those conditions. And again, I'm going to choose the key input, and I'm going to choose the left key, and I'm going to switch this to up. We're just going to do this one more time, and then I'll explain what all of this is going to do. We'll switch this to key, click on keyboard. I'm going to use spacebar for the jump, and I of course want to switch this to up. So basically, what are we saying here with the code? We're saying when the right key is released or up, the left key is released or up, or the spacebar is released or up, what do we want to happen? Well, because I know what we're building here, I can tell you, and this is where it's kind of all going to kind of make a little bit of sense, what we want is our character to stop. We're going to be using the accelerate or linear velocity attributes of our character, and if we didn't have this set up right here, our character would never stop. If we were to push the left key, he would just continuously move. If we were to push the right key, he would continuously move even if we let go of the right key. So these keyboards inputs being up, we want to change our character's motion, and we're going to do this with a change attribute. So I'll grab the change attribute behavior and drag and drop that up into this rule here. And we want to change our character's motion, or his linear velocity. And the way we locate that is by clicking on this icon here. I'm going to click on hero because that's the actor that we're working with. Again, it's important to name your actors. We're going to scroll down to motion, over to linear velocity, and the velocity that we're going to be working with is his x velocity, which also means left and right or horizontal. Y would be up and down or vertical. So I'll just double click on x. So take a moment to look at this. Hero, motion, linear velocity, double click on x. And we want to change that linear velocity in x to 0. So again, that might seem very overwhelming if you're not familiar with these techniques yet, but just take a moment to read this. When the right key is up, the left key is up, or the space bar is up, then we want to take our character's motion in the horizontal and switch that down to 0. Okay, so that was the part that didn't quite make sense until we get through it. This might be one of those times where you want to just kind of take a screenshot of the video here and take a look at what I set up here, and then everything will make sense as we plug in the rest of this. So let's move on. We're going to open up this otherwise here. And now we want to actually set up the movement for our character, because we pretty much just started by setting up what stops our character from moving. But we want to set up the movement. So I'm going to click in an empty area and click Create Rule. I'm going to drag this rule into this otherwise section up in here. And again, we want to choose a key input. And I'm going to choose the right key. And this time when the right key is down, what do I want to happen? Well, again, I'm going to go to Change Attribute. I'm going to drag and drop that into this rule. So again, these were to stop our actor, and now we're building the motion for our actor. So we're going to find that linear velocity again. So when the right key is down, we want to find our hero's motion linear velocity in x. And what do we want to change that to? Well, we want to change it to a positive number like 200, which means he'll move to the right of the screen. If I wanted him to move to the left of the screen, I just put negative 200. So let's go ahead and test that out. I'll hit Preview. We can see our character does fall, and if I push the right key, we can see he does shoot off to the right, which is exactly what we want. So now to set up the left motion is pretty simple. All we have to do is close this rule. I'll name this Move Right. And I'm going to hold the Alt or Option key and just duplicate it. I'm going to make sure that I don't drag it out, but I keep it in this Otherwise area. So it's been completely duplicated, and when I do that, of course, I'm going to make sure I double-click and rename it right away. Move Left. And then I'm just going to switch things. I'm going to click on this keyboard input again. I'm going to switch this to the left key. And we already chose his motion linear velocity in x, and instead of it going 200, which we already determined moves him to the right, we're going to do a minus 200. So his linear velocity is now set to minus 200, which should move him to the left. So let's just look at all we set up here. Very simple stuff. The right key, when it's pressed, change the linear velocity of our actor to 200. When the left key is pressed, change the linear velocity of our actor in x to minus 200. And of course we can go ahead and preview this. So left key, and then the right key, and my actor is moving left and right perfectly, which is exactly what I want. Now, one other thing that we want for our actor's movement in left and right is you notice that when we preview, our actor does move to the right and he's facing to the right, but when I push the left key, he is still facing to the right. So this is a good time to go ahead and set up his change of image for left and right. So with this Move Right and Move Left to open, all I'm going to do is click on my Images tab here. And this is a little trick where we don't actually have to use the Change Image behavior. We can just take the right facing image, and we can drag and drop that. Again, make sure you're very careful where you drag and drop things into the Move Right rule. So Move Right will change the linear velocity to positive 200. It will also change the image to our right image. And make sure this is the image that's selected. If it's not, go ahead and choose it from the list. And now we can do the exact same thing with the Move Left. So when Move Left key is pressed, we want to change an image. So I'll just grab the image from the image bay here, not from the actor bay. And we're going to drop that into this Move Left rule right there. So now pushing the left key will change that image back. So let's go ahead and preview this and see if it works. So left and right, and you can see that our character is turning around and facing a different way when we push those left and right keys. And just because we're done now with all of this kind of background image and we have it set up exactly the way we want, let's go ahead and take a moment to turn that off. So I'm just going to go into the ground actor, double click on that, and I'm going to open up the color pull down, and you see this alpha set to 1. We want to switch that to 0, and that's actually going to make the ground completely transparent. Now, I only recommend doing this if you're done adjusting the ground surface, which in my case I totally was. But you can see if we click inside our scene, our ground surfaces are still there. So again, sometimes you want to leave that on just so it's easier to work with, but let's preview this. And let's see how it's looking now with our invisible ground surfaces turned off, or their images or alpha turned off. And you can see our character just kind of hangs out inside the weeds of our level. And that little tiny white glowing eye keeps us focused on his location. So perfect. Go ahead and set up your left and right. Make sure that you have your character turning his image left or right depending on which one that you're working with. In the next video, we're going to add the jump behavior to our character.